everybody. I am happy to welcome you to the Red Alert Report. We have a special guest with us, Rabbi Shmuel Bowman. He is a husband, father, grandfather, rabbi, Torah scribe, and executive director of Operation Lifeshield. He joins us from Israel. We also have Shelley Neese with us today as we continue our series called Communion and Connectedness, where we want to bring you firsthand experience and knowledge from Israel in these darker days since October 7. Rabbi, welcome to our program and thank you for giving us some of your time. And please tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and where you are located in Israel. And then we'd like to hear more about your experiences, at least in the last few months or last month, as you live in Israel.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Shelley. It's good to be here. I appreciate being on this interview. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, and grew up in a traditional Jewish home and a very strong Zionist home with some very strong role models in my life who showed me that Israel was not only a place for Jews to think about and to visit, but also to live. I had a great aunt who actually went directly from Europe, from Poland, and came to what was called Palestine back then in the 1930s. And she was a founder of one of the kibbutzim in Israel near Rehovot. And unfortunately, she passed away at a young age. And part of my reason for making Aliyah, in a sense, was to continue her dream. I also have an uncle who spent a lot of time in Israel, studied here, and also fought in both the Six-Day War in 1967 and in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And so I had some very strong role models in terms of that. I met my wife in Israel. She's from Detroit, Michigan, but we did meet in Jerusalem. And I always kind of warn young adults when they come on Israel trips, warn, and that is that you never know, the person standing beside you or sitting on the bus beside you may become your spouse one day. That's what happened to me and my wife. And we were married back in the States, but within a year, we fulfilled our dream of when I say living in the land of Israel and making aliyah, in other words, going up to the land of Israel, what that means for me and for my wife, Leah, is we didn't want to be observers of the unfolding history and the unfolding destiny that was taking place in the land of Israel. We wanted to be participants and, if possible, even to be leaders in that unfolding of, in a sense of prophetic destiny. And so we made Aliyah, and since then we have 5 children and a son-in-law and 2 grandchildren, and that brings us up to date. As you mentioned, I am a Torah scribe. Some of the things you see behind me allude to that. A lot of writing instruments and feathers and parchment and things like that. And my other kippah, my other hat, is as the executive director of Operation Lifeshield. And this is something that I joined in 2006 at the time of the Second Lebanon War. And the reason it started is because we understood during that war, which was in the northern part of Israel on the border with Lebanon, and it went on for a month. And during that time, you had 3,000 rockets fired into Israel over a period of a month, so approximately 100 rockets a day, approximately. And it became very clear that the strategy for bomb shelters was not going to be what was going to be sustainable going forward. And so a group of volunteers, Americans as well as Israeli, approached the Israeli army and said, "What can we do to help?" And the Israeli army said, "Well, what we're going to be needing going forward, or we're going to need smaller bomb shelters that are accessible. They're very simple. They're above ground, and that people can run into. So if Shelley and Amy and myself are sitting and having a cup of coffee, and the siren goes, we can leave everything on the table. We can run to a bomb shelter. let the danger pass, and then return to our lives. In other words, try and live as normal as possible in an abnormal situation. And so we took that initiative. We answered that call, and I joined the organization within 2 months, or a month or 2 months after it started. And that's what we've been doing. We've been placing hundreds and hundreds of bomb shelters and other protective solutions throughout Israel for the last 17 years. I'm speaking to you from my home and study in Efrat. Efrat is just south of Jerusalem. It's actually beside Bethlehem. We sometimes talk about the fact that Efrat is a suburb of Bethlehem, or Bethlehem is a suburb of Efrat. But it's if you look at a map, you'll be able to see that Efrat is just south of Jerusalem. It's actually situated between Jerusalem and Hebron. It's in the Judean hills, what some people might call the West Bank, which we call the biblical heartland. And it's, I think, one of the most beautiful places in the world.
So, can you share with us what has your daily life been? What has your community been going through, whether it's your personal family members or your neighbors or yourself, since that horrible Shabbat morning of October 7th, what it was like to wake up and the world just changed in an instant, probably, I'm assuming. But I mean, are you able to share with us your reflections on that day?
Sure. So actually, we need to roll it back 2 days beforehand,
Okay.
because you're absolutely right. The atrocities that took place on Shabbat, which was also the Jewish festival of Simchat Torah, so the rejoicing of the Torah, on Saturday, October the 7th. On Thursday, October the 5th, I led a group. It was during the Feast of Tabernacles, as it's called by our Christian friends, and thousands of Christians were in Israel to celebrate. And I had the great honor of leading 350 Christians to the border with Gaza, to a couple places, but our last stop was Nativa Asara. It's a kibbutz right, when I say on the border, their southern wall, their southern gate is the border with Gaza. That's Nativa Asara. And there is a place there called, and Nativa Asara means the path of the 10. And there's a fascinating project called Nativa Shalom, which means the path of peace. And there they have this protective wall. It's actually part of the wall system between Gaza and Israel. And over the years, people have been painting pictures. They've been affixing tiles, artistic tiles. They've been affixing notes. It's almost like a southern version of the Western Wall. It's a place of prayer. It's a place of hope. And we met with the amazing people of Nativ Asara, of this moshav. Actually, it's a moshav, a communal town, and people just so filled with hope, and so filled with, they can almost taste what peace with their neighbors in Gaza would be like. And we were there, and we were just literally, now we had, I think, for 350 of us, I think we probably had 7 armed, official armed security people, 7 for 350 of us. And nobody had an inkling that 2 days later, terrorists would cross that very same wall and enter Nativ Asara, where 17 of my friends were murdered at Nativ Asara, on the very places that we stood only 2 days beforehand, on the 5th of October. So now we flash forward to Saturday of the 7th of October, and I'm in synagogue, and we had just finished the very initial parts of the prayer service in the morning, and now it was the time for actually taking the Torah scrolls out and dancing with them. This is a joyful, joyful time where we dance with the Torah scrolls, and we begin the cycle of the Torah scrolls again. So we start reading from the beginning from the book of Genesis, right? And just before that happened, the rabbi of the synagogue stood up, and he gave a very kind of a cryptic kind of, now we look back at a very cryptic announcement, and he said something to the effect of, in the event of code red, we need to go into the bomb shelter our synagogue has two floors. There's an upper synagogue and a lower synagogue, and there's a big bomb shelter in the lower synagogue. And he says that's where everyone should go. And I'm thinking, what a crazy thing to say. I mean, okay, we're not real, as I mentioned, where we are. We're south of Jerusalem. We're not on the Gaza border. Because of my work, I'm used to code red sirens. I've been many, many times having to take shelter in bomb shelters, and sometimes where there has not been a bomb shelter, I've had to hit the ground and cover your head and all that kind of stuff. So I've had my share of code reds. I have my eldest son lived in Sderot for 5 years. My other son served in the Israeli Defense Forces on the Gaza border. I mean, I'm familiar with that, but here in Efrat, didn't make sense. And fine, we go outside to start dancing with the Torah scroll. Sure enough, code red sirens are going off, and I'm like, this is really, really strange. I had a feeling that this was not a usual kind of a rocket attack. And so while I would say most of the people ran into the bomb shelter in the synagogue, I actually ran home. I figured this is something not something doesn't feel right. And I went home, and by this point we have a bomb shelter in our house. And at this point in time, my wife and granddaughter who was staying with us, we were in the bomb shelter, and we could actually hear explosions happening overhead. And like this is really really quite something. Short time later on, the security were, now don't forget, we're Orthodox Jews, which means that we're Sabbath observant, which means unless there's an emergency, you're not watching TV, you're not watching radio. And so the news and the information was not so fast and fluid coming to us. Okay. We were getting bits and pieces of information. But for example, I was out in the street and kind of checking out what was going on, and the security forces were coming by, and they were saying, best to stay in your house and to lock your doors. Lock your doors.
Mm.
That's very, very strange. Lock your doors. Why would we need to lock our doors? I mean, we live in a community where we often do not lock our doors. Okay. And it didn't add up. Okay, I understand going to your bomb shelter. I get that. But why do we need to lock our doors, right? And as a matter of fact, I even saw these two men, probably father and son, or perhaps brothers, walking down the street, and security actually stopped them and said, "Are you walking towards your home right now?" And they said, "Well, no, we're just going for a walk." And they said, "Get in the car. We're driving you back to your house." So there was an environment of something very strange going on. And of course, at that point in time, my son, Gavriel, who had been in another community, and I said, we're Orthodox Jews, which means we don't drive and we don't. But in the case of a life-threatening situation, the mitzvot, the commandments, and the prohibitions regarding Sabbath stop. That's a general rule. And next thing you know, our son Gavriel had driven home, and he basically said, "I have 45 minutes to get my stuff together. I'm heading to the Gaza border. I'm joining my tank brigade. I've been called up."
Wow.
And that
Mm.
was okay. So that's what we did. My wife had all sorts of food for him, packed a cooler of food for him and his friends, right? And it was food that was supposed to be for a community potluck lunch, but no one was going to have that potluck lunch because the sirens. So we took all this chicken and put it into a big cooler. We were giving him money, we were giving him whatever he needed, and within 45 minutes, he was on his way to his tank base. The news after Shabbat, news was starting to come in throughout Shabbat. dribs and drabs. And by the time Shabbat ended, and we did Havdalah, which brought us into the week, we heard the news that at this point in time, we heard something in the area of like 200 Israelis had been killed. And we're like, what? What are you talking? 200? You know,
Mhm.
the news was starting to get more and more. And I was on the phone in touch with the security chiefs that I'm in regular contact with in the Gaza Belt area. I was getting really up to date information and actually finding out that the numbers were significantly higher and that the numbers were unknown. At first, we had heard something in the area that there was 500 terrorists had crossed into Israel. Then it was 1,000. It was 1,500, and of course, then we later learned that it was approximately 3,000 Hamas terrorists, or as we call them, an army of terror, had crossed into Israel. And thus, everything that we really had thought of in terms of our hopes and dreams towards creating partnerships. I wouldn't even say peace, but a better future with us and the Palestinians in Gaza came to a crashing end. We always knew that Hamas is a terror organization. I've been for 17 years. We've been preparing for small and large attacks. Perhaps I'm more in touch with it because I am in the world of passive defense. In other words, providing solutions for being protected from attacks. And most people aren't really in that mindset. So I see this on a daily basis. My attitude has always been for the last 17 years, right? Amy, if your next door neighbor, literally your next door neighbor in the house beside you, if the next door neighbor said to you, Amy, or to you, Shelley, I'm planning on murdering you and your entire family. And let's say your neighbor not only said that in words, but you could see that they were also, you could hear the shooting taking place in their own home. You could hear them filing their knives to make them sharper. You're getting messages on a daily basis saying, I'm coming to kill you, I'm coming to kill you. I would think that you would probably take that threat pretty seriously and that you would do things in order to safeguard you and your family. And this has been our um, mission for the last 17 years, knowing that we have an enemy who has not just in words, but in deed has actually attacked and murdered, you know, so why shouldn't we believe this? But you know what? When you're desperate for hope, and when you're tired of violence, you will create all sorts of, and to put it in the words of my friend Ilan Isaacson, who is the security chief of the Eshkol region, which is a region in southern Israel with the largest border with Gaza, as he put it, we forgot to treat the enemy as our enemy. We forgot to treat the enemy as our enemy. And what we were doing is we were treating our enemy as potential allies, which is not going to work because they're screaming, we're going to kill you, we're going to kill you. And we're calling back, oh, but we want to build bridges of peace. We want to create industrial parks and academic centers and hospitals. And, one of my closest friends, Ofer Lipstein, who was the mayor of Shar HaNegev, I had been with him on many occasions to tour his dream. And his dream was this incredible park. There's a community just on the east corner, northeast corner of Gaza, as it borders Israel on the Israeli side, where kibbutzim and other Jewish communities literally gave up land in Israel to create parks of peace, where Palestinians from Gaza would be able to come over for medical services of the highest caliber, that they would be able to study in branches of our best universities, to work in good jobs and get paid 10 times the amount that they were getting in Gaza, and so on and so forth. He had amassed a group of some of the top industrial and corporate leaders in Israel and from abroad. He got together the top universities and the top medical centers. I saw this place with my own eyes on several occasions. It was his dream. And on October the 7th, Ofer Lipstein was one of the first people murdered by this army of terror. And thus, his dream of that type of possibility also came to a crashing end because we finally realized we need to treat our enemy as our enemy. So October the 7th was when all the masks came off and we realized who our neighbors are and who we also learned who our friends are around the world, the countries who either stood with us or criticized us or stayed quiet. When you walk into Yad Vashem, the Holocaust memorial in Jerusalem, the first thing that you are greeted with as you kind of on your left-hand side there as you walk in through the main entrance is a quote that says, in silence, you condone evil.
Mm-hmm.
In silence, you condone evil. When you allow evil to happen without saying something, you are
Mm-hmm.
supporting evil. And for that to be the first words that you have at Yad Vashem is a powerful idea, and I agree with that. And so world leaders who stayed quiet, academic leaders, inspirational, spiritual leaders who preferred not to get involved, in their silence and in their neutrality, they made a statement that said, it's okay to behead babies. It's okay to rape women. It's okay to hack people to death in front of their families. That's okay. And of course, we learned very, very quickly who our friends are and who they're not. So that's what happened on October 7th. I personally, as the dust began to settle and we began to discover more and more, I realized that at this point the count is somewhere 12 of my good friends were murdered. And as I even speak these words to you, I'm almost detached. I'm almost
Mm-hmm.
detached because I hear myself saying that to you, and yet I am in such still at this point in such a state of disbelief. Can't be
Mm-hmm.
true. And yet I go through the list and Shachar and Elon and you know, they're gone. They've been
Mm-hmm.
murdered. They've been murdered and they were targeted, as were the children. Do you know that there was a group of senior citizens who were using the holiday, as it were? They weren't in the synagogue. They decided that they would take a bus tour of the Dead Sea region, beautiful part of the country. And these were older seniors, people in their 70s and their 80s, who had chartered a bus to pick them up at a bus stop and to take them on this beautiful Saturday morning to see the beauty of the Dead Sea region. And the fact that they were, all gunned down. Okay, a group of elderly people purposely gunned down at a bus stop while waiting for their chartered bus to take them on a sightseeing tour. This is the atrocities. There was an Israeli commentator, and what he said really resonated with me. And he said, we need to invent or find new words to describe the atrocities because the language that we have, the words that we have currently in our vocabulary do not describe, cannot describe the level of horror that took place on October the 7th. And, it's not like that day kind of like happened and then, okay, now we can move on.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about, somewhere in the area of 12 to 1,300 dead. And I say up to 1,300 because we still have many bodies that we don't, sorry to be a little bit graphic here, they're not even bodies. We have pieces
Mm-hmm.
of carbon that look like charcoal briquettes. I'm sorry for being graphic,
Mm-hmm.
that we can't even get the DNA off of. But we've brought in archaeologists from Jerusalem who deal with artifacts and have positively identified them as human bone. We, we
Mm-hmm.
we don't know. We can't get the DNA off of it. So I can't tell you the numbers, but somewhere between 1,300 between 12 and 1,300 of our family were murdered. We have, uh, as you know, over 200 were taken captive. Now that number has been reduced, so it's somewhere in the area of between approximately 170. Are in a horrible situation. We've had uh, 12, uh, 12 young women were hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital 2 weeks ago because independently they all tried to commit suicide.
Mm.
The level of
Women from the Gaza Belt region.
yeah, from the concert, from the festival. We can only assume the horrors that happened, the um, the gang rapes that took place, the uh, unspeakable things, the things that people witnessed and saw and experienced. And for these 12 women in particular, it was just too much. Thankfully, people intervened and they were hospitalized in a psychiatric facility because it was just too much. We have uh, thousands of wounded. Okay, we've got an entire hospital of people who have had limbs amputated. Okay,
Mhm.
um, not, we've got people who are going to be experiencing PTSD for the rest of their lives. So this isn't something that kind of started and ended on October the 7th.
Mm-mm.
Um, of course, Israel understood immediately that we're at war. This wasn't a regular attack, and
Mhm.
so correctly, our government went in and it didn't happen right away. I mean, it was the army had to get itself ready and everything, and by the time it took a while, and then eventually, uh, in a systematic and organized way, it didn't rush in. It's not like in the movies where you see like the invasion of Normandy or something like that, where all the
Mhm.
the boats and planes and hell, that wasn't it was very boring actually. It was extremely boring and very efficient, and it was done to minimize casualties, actually, both for Israeli soldiers as well as Palestinian civilians. It was meant to minimize the casualty numbers, which I think they've been successful at doing. What they've done is they took a 1 mile square block in Gaza, and they would go in and they would say, okay, we're taking this 1 mile square area. Okay, we're going to secure it. We're going to clean it. We're going to make sure that it's free of terrorists. We're going to explore the tunnel systems. We're going to find out what's going on. We're going to take out the terror cells. My son was telling me that approximately one in every three homes. I'm talking about civilian homes. One in every three homes was actually a terror base of some kind or another. And so they would take it one square block at a time. And so, as I say, it wasn't this kind of the cavalry coming in. It was just very, very carefully planned and very carefully done in order to, with a lot of protocol, everything done to the T according to international law. The
Mhm.
everything was done with a team of military lawyers, making sure that every single step of the way was according to international law, which they succeeded
Mhm.
in doing. And so we have so just to kind of like wrap up with my conclusions, what we saw on October the 7th and following with the mobilization of the IDF is a solidarity and a unity in the land of Israel, in the nation of Israel, that we simply haven't seen before. We literally have a unity that is taking place in this land. And this is something I feel so personally. Um, you know, uh, we all, right? We have this in America. We have this everywhere. Everyone likes to be kind of like classified. What are you? Oh, what are you? Oh, you're a dot, dot, dot. Everything is like a bunch of adjectives, right? You're a this and a this and this and this and this until you get to what who you really are. And this is also happening in Israel, right? Today, there is no right, there is no left. There's no
Mhm.
religious, there's no secular. There's no Ashkenazi, in other words, coming from European descent. There's no Sephardi coming from North African or Arab country descent. Um, there's no rich, there's no poor. We've literally, I would say, we are repulsed. If I can even, it's not even that we don't want to have disunity. We are repulsed by disunity. If anyone brings up the idea that there are walls between the Jewish people, it is nauseating to us. Okay, and we are responding. So there are a few people who every now and then try to stir things up, and on short order, they are swatted away and they are delegitimized. And so I think to witness that personally is absolutely, what can I say? That's prophetic, and that's where we are today. That's where we are today. I am, I, I'm angry. But it's interesting because I'm not necessarily angry at Hamas. That that ship has left, a long time ago. I'm not angry at Hamas. Hamas are doing exactly what they said they'd be doing. They're very, very truthful. They said they'd come and kill us, and they did. I give them credit for that. They're people of their word in that respect. Right? They hate us. They hate us. They want to kill us. They want it. Their mandate is the destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Perfect. They were right on. My anger is with those around the world, my own home country of Canada, and in the country where my wife is from, the United States, Europe. My father's from England originally, friends across Europe, relatives and friends in Australia, so-called Western democracies where people just completely got it wrong. And for some bizarre reason, they've decided that as MSNBC said, on the first days of the war, there are two sides to the story. To which my response was, yeah, really? Which sides are those? You are either for or against beheading babies. I mean, where are the two sides of the story here? And that has been very, very. That's something that I'm very angry about. That we actually do live in a world where anti-Semitism is alive and well, and thankfully, we are seeing, for example, in your community, who our real friends are, and there's no gray area. There really isn't. It's very binary. It's either right or wrong. There's no two sides. Okay, there's either good or evil, right? That there's no let's have a debate here. There's no debate. Okay, there's no debate. And this, what we're dealing right now is we're dealing with a war for the sake of humanity. The problem is that most of humanity doesn't really care, but we do.
So so our viewers, most, just about all of our viewers, their heart is for Israel and the Jewish people. And when they're in their own family gatherings, their own churches or schools or workplaces, what do they need to know, or where can they go find information to know how to, when they're talking to people who say, but there's two sides, or we'll look at it from their point of view, or what about the thousands of Palestinians that are being killed, or the children, etc. Where can we direct them for information? Obviously, you just, in your own words right here, you told us things that I've never seen in our news feeds, and I look at all the news feeds around the world. I mean, the bus, you said that the bus of the senior citizens, that never saw that one.
Right.
And also the idea of the emotional aftermath. I don't think people understand what you've already expressed is in your mourning. You can't even mourn your friends, and that loss of a dream with what the work that was being done on the Gaza border, and then you have to contemplate that with your anger, your righteous anger, and the fact that you're in a war, right? So there's a compartmentalizing all of these emotions, not to mention things like the women's movements, the Me Too's and the Free Our Girls Now people. They're all just silent on on the trauma, the unspeakable trauma that has people ever. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's very interesting. Somebody asked me the other day, wow, Shmuel, you're going through so much. As I say, they weren't lost, having had 12 friends murdered, having had
Ripped away.
ripped away, one of my dear, dear friends, Jonathan, Chen, his son, Sagi, is a captive in Gaza. You think about that for a second. Think about having a friend and that their child is now, and the fact that their child is an adult male doesn't take away from the fact anybody who's a parent doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A child is a child, and to have his child completely, he doesn't know, hasn't heard anything. He's not on the negotiating list right now because he's an adult male, which makes him at the bottom of the list, and God knows what his situation is. To be able to have that. So somebody said to me, Shmuel, how are you coping with all that? My response was, I'm not doing it alone. We're not doing it alone. We are going through this together. In Israel, everybody knows somebody, and at some degree or another, everybody, is experiencing, and we're all doing this together. And there's a sense in Israel that you're not alone. And I think that really is critical to know that's happening. And so, when you look out and you say, well, how do we make sense of all of this? I don't know if I'm even ready, to be honest with you, to make sense of this. I was very clear. I told my son-in-law my son-in-law is in the Israeli police force. Actually, he's still in training, and he actually started the training in the Israeli police just before October the 7th. But as you can imagine, they've been fast tracking him. They need able-bodied police officers in Israel, and so he was already out doing his field work with supervision, of course, much earlier than would have been on the regular schedule. He's also working double shifts. And I said to him, there's no question that I have PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question. And I think that and there's several reasons for that. And I know that I would say probably most of Israel has PTSD at this point. How can you not? How can you absorb what's been going on, what has happened to us, and not be affected in some way? And then, like you said, for that trauma to be denied around the world. Okay. So it's one thing that you've gone through this trauma or that you've been traumatized. Okay. I'm thinking again of the example of the many women that have been raped and sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
And the Me Too movement in the United States was always based on one simple principle. Okay. I believe you. That was always the response from the Me Too movement whenever any woman came out and said, I was sexually assaulted. Before anything else took place, even before any evidence came to the fold, the immediate response was, I believe you. And what we're seeing now, as you said, closed lips on that, closed mouth on that. In other words, I don't believe you. Show me, right? What's the constant refrain we're hearing from academics and from all the what they call talking heads and where's the proof? Where's the evidence? Well, it's a little tricky to get semen samples when you're hiding for your life for 10 hours under a pile of dead bodies. Okay, it's kind of hard to have a rape kit out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and again, I apologize for being graphic, but it's the only way I can really drive the point home that it's a double trauma. It's the trauma of experienced whatever you've experienced or having witnessed whatever you've witnessed, and the trauma of not being believed. And hearing this chorus of of the, of so-called, you know, liberal democratic thinkers who are trying to, who proclaim that they that they have the high ground. Well, I'll tell you this. I have a very dear friend. She's actually the president of our board of directors for our Israeli branch. She is a lifelong socialist. She's probably a communist. She comes from a family of socialists. She lives at a kibbutz. I love her like my sister. She's amazing. And she has basically said the following: the world the left wing liberal world has betrayed me. Those are her words. This is someone who's been a lifelong socialist and has fought for women's rights and fought for animal rights and fought for, all
All the
the gender
rights.
preference and everything that goes into the entire liberal buffet, which is fine. Except that the world voices have come back to her and have said, we don't believe you. And so she feels betrayed by them. So that's the double trauma. And so how do I respond to that? I mean, it's kind of like this. You know what? When you know what you know, when you know what's right, you know, I don't need to be, and this goes back to your question about how do you actually, how does one of your viewers standing at the water cooler at the office or around the family dinner table respond to somebody who says, yeah, but, the other side of the story is, and look at the numbers of those who've been, killed in Gaza and, and the genocide and all that kind of stuff. And my response to that is as follows. First of all, you know, I don't know if you're going to win an argument with the protesters on the street, but you can sway the person sitting at your dining room table, and you can have an influence on your colleague around the water cooler or the photocopy machine. And that is by simply saying the following: I'm telling you, as your friend or as your relative, as your colleague, that you don't have all the facts. The facts is that on October the 7th, an army of terror targeted babies, women, children, families, senior citizens, targeted them. And since October the 7th, we have been at war with that army of terror. And in the process of defending our land, yes, it's very true. Many, many Palestinians have been killed. And war is terrible. But let's be very clear. We did not target anybody. We did not target anybody except for terrorists, and they deserve to be and I don't think anyone can ever argue against that. And if they do, then there's really no point in having a conversation because they have left their brain, somewhere else, and their heart has gone completely black. But once we get past the idea that we can actually, that killing terrorists, killing baby beheaders is fine. The fact is that war is a terrible thing. It's not something we want at all. And yet the work of fighting this evil it does, and as we've seen, has had a very high toll. We would like very, very much if Hamas wouldn't be so cowardly and they would come out and fight like a proper army fights. But instead, in their cowardice and in their immorality, they choose to fight behind the human shields of innocent Palestinians. Is that our problem? We try and minimize the number of casualties as much as we can by warning them, telling them to leave areas. We give them lots of notice. Okay? If they heed it, that's not our problem. If they're forced to stay, then that's a commentary on the leadership that they follow. And we have to do our work, and that work is to, let's face it, to go back to the example, both of you, if you have a neighbor who's going to kill you and is promising to kill you, you're going to do everything, and I mean everything, to save your family's life. I dare anybody to say that they will be prepared to allow their own children to be killed, okay, and hold fire against their enemy. Okay? I'm sorry. If somebody says that, they need their head examined. We would do anything and everything to protect our families. And that's what we're doing. We're defending our families in Israel. And it's war, and war is lousy.
Mhm.
It is. Do you have any other topics or anecdotes or emotions that you want to share with us and our viewers so that we can continue to pray and also continue to do something effective? I mean, so many of us in the States and in Canada, we feel somewhat powerless. We feel like we're hitting our head against a wall because we want to help, and we certainly want to shake a few people and convince them to change the ways of their thinking. But what can you tell us or let us know so that we can do more if we're not doing enough?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
been thinking, what does tomorrow look like for Operation Defensive Shield? You know, also, I mean, I'm sure organizationally, I don't know what the pivot is, but what are you looking at?
Okay, so there's two parts to that. I'll deal with the second thing first. Operation Life Shield, how we're pivoting is the fact that we meet every single day with the security chiefs of every region in southern Israel, and let's not forget northern Israel. Dear friends, we have a war going on with Hezbollah on the north. I'm going to be there tomorrow. I'm going to be on the Israel-Lebanon border tomorrow, where we are currently repairing and renovating dozens and dozens of underground bomb shelters in border communities, so that people can come back to their homes and be able to take shelter when they need to. So I'm going up there to meet with our project contractors up there. What does Operation Life Shield look like the day after? We have woken up to the fact that we need to take our enemy seriously. And that means that we need to be a lot more proactive in terms of defending. If we haven't already been working on defending Israel, we need to do even more so. Now, that may sound like we're going to become some kind of like military state or something like that, but that's not the case at all. Anybody who's in security, anybody who's watching this program right now, who's ever been, for example, in the U.S. military, or has served in the military, or works as a police officer, or any other form of security, they will understand when I say that there is a layer of reality, okay, that exists in every scenario that's happening in day-to-day life, okay? And, they're not walking around being paranoid. What they're doing is they're walking around being prepared. And when you're prepared, okay, and that means really doing the research and understanding who your potential threats are, how to protect you and your family effectively, how to make sure that you know how to use a firearm correctly, making sure that you know how to de-escalate a violent situation. Once you have that kind of information going on, then you can really relax. Then you can relax. Okay. Thinking that you don't need to have that knowledge or that preparedness is really living in a fantasy. That's not the world that we live in. Okay. The world that we live in has evil, and we need to always be prepared. The Bible talks about the image, right, of the person with a sword in one hand and a plowing shear with the other. Okay, there's a powerful prophetic image of having in one hand defense, okay, and on the other hand industry, okay, that I need to have in my life. I need to put food on my table. I need to be able to support my family. I need to enjoy life. I need to go to concerts. I need to see art. I need to play. That's the one hand. On the other hand, I need to make sure that I am prepared always to defend my family and my community. And I think that is going to be articulated more. And I think our organization is probably in one of the main driving seats, if you will, for making that happen. We're not only bomb shelters anymore. We're communication systems, okay, radio-based communication systems, because as we found on October 7th, Guess what? The entire cell phone network collapsed within 5 minutes. Okay. So anybody who thinks that their cell phone is going to be helpful when there's a crisis, think again, my friends. Within minutes, the entire network can crash down, and you're going to need alternatives. So we are one of the largest providers um, of radio-based communication, which we've been told we've been told by the security chiefs. I didn't make this up. We've been told that because of radio communications, thousands of lives were saved on October the 7th because security officers were able to respond and react within 3 minutes. By the way, that's the kind of time frame that we have. It's not like the movies where you have time to go get your gun and load it and think about things. Okay. You need to respond between 1 and 3 minutes because after 3 minutes, you're running and you're already in a very, very bad position. And I think once we begin understanding and thinking in those terms, multi-layer, in other words, I want to enjoy my life and everything and have a good time, but I also know there's another layer that requires preparedness. And I think that's how we go forward. And I think, as I say, Lifeshield is prepared for that. We're also providing ATV vehicles, ATV firefighting vehicles, um, uh, medical kits, defibrillators, anything that involves in saving lives, keeping people safe. We're really in the top position for doing that. As far as the first question is concerned, what can people do? First of all, you have a voice, and each person does, in fact, have the power of one. And plus one, plus one, plus one makes an entire army of activists. You can speak out when you hear something happening, especially amongst friends and family and coworkers. Don't be quiet. Don't do as the warning on Yad Vashem says that silence condones evil. Don't do that. Say something, back it up, either with fact or even with your own emotion. There's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, what you just said really hurts me. No one can argue with how you feel. What you just said just really hurts me. Oh, really? Oh, Amy, why does that really hurt you? I didn't mean to hurt you. Well, you did, because what you are saying, okay, is that innocent people deserve to die in Israel. That's what you're basically saying. And that hurt me. And that in itself can be a response. As far as getting news is concerned, absolutely they should be obviously tuning in and watching every single thing you guys are doing. Okay. The interviews that you're having, and all the information that you're providing is going to be extremely important. For those who are interested in getting daily updates, I encourage them to go to our daily news briefings. Okay, we use the Telegram platform because it is the most secure platform for providing personal confidentiality. So if you don't already have Telegram, you may want to consider uploading that and go to OL, as in Operation Life Shield, OL Israel News Briefs, OL Israel News Briefs, and join. And what you'll get is a daily summary of the points and it's often in point form. Sometimes it has pictures and videos. We produce this on a daily basis, and it's going to give you real tools for being able to have those kind of conversations and be able to go to the next level and say, okay, let me show you what's going on. And I think that that's really important. So it's called OL Israel News Briefs on Telegram. And pray. Can I tell you that I can't begin to describe. I've discussed the unity that exists in the land of Israel, but let me tell you that prayer has been a unifying factor. People who had never considered prayer to God before are turning to God. People who are where it hadn't been a priority before are making it a priority. And people who had been making it a priority before are making it deeper, are making it even never seen in my lifetime. And that prayer is happening in Israel. It's also happening on the world. We are aware of the fact that the prayers that you and everybody watching have for Israel. These are your warriors. You're warriors in prayer, and you have not been relieved of duty. Okay, we need you. We need you, and we need your prayers. We need you to call out to God our Father, to God our defender, to God our liberator, and that can't stop. It has to be part of our daily life. It has to increase and increase. I would encourage those who are watching who don't know what to do to be able to turn to their friends and colleagues and say, you may have a different opinion, but let's pray together, okay, for the safe return of the captives, all of them, for the healing of the wounded, and for the consoling of the mourners. Can we do that? Okay, these are things that we can do.
Rabbi, please convey to your community, your family members, anybody that you're working with, that there is a huge contingent in America and North America and in Europe that are praying. So I hope that it offers some encouragement and a little bit of just a sliver of peace, that even though the news might show otherwise and world leaders might say otherwise, that there's millions of people that are on your side. Also working hard on behalf of our Jewish community members here. Our Jewish neighbors here are not completely foreign to the they're feeling the hate now more than ever. And we're also, I'm sure you guys are aware of it in Israel, but in fact, one of my Jewish friends here said that they couldn't believe that their friend in Israel, or it was a family member or a good friend, was asking them in America, in the Bethesda area, how are you doing? Are you okay? Because they're seeing the news here. So, Shelley and I just want to let our brothers and sisters know that we're here for you, and we're doing, if there's something we're not doing, then by all means tell us. We'll work on it. As far as how we can be an encouragement and a support system.
Well, I take that to heart, and I receive that, and I'm very grateful to you both, and I'm very grateful to everyone in your community for standing with us. And I know that whether it's on campuses where Jews feel embattled, where they feel isolated, I know that there are Christians, there are believers who stand with the Jewish students, with their fellow students, and say, not on my watch. This is not going to happen. And I know that that's happening. And I appreciate you telling this, and I will convey your message to my friends. I will let them know that they're not alone, that thousands of miles away, there are amazing people who are thinking of them, who are praying for them, who are advocating and speaking out on their behalf. We want to make sure that that when I think of my friend Livnat, who, along with her husband and 3 children, were murdered in their house in Kfar Aza, and she believed so much in this friendship, for her, in her memory. Yeah, in her memory, to know that we're not alone. So,
Amen. Am Israel Chai, right?
You said it. Am Israel Chai.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
עם ישראל, עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי. עוד אבינו חי, עוד אבינו חי.